The invitation arrived without fanfare, which was unsettling. In Adrian Vale's experience, anything truly dangerous in interstellar politics arrived either wrapped in ceremony or wrapped in silence. This one arrived as a single encrypted pulse on his desk console, while he was arguing with the beverage synthesizer about what legally qualified as coffee. "Define robust," the machine demanded in a tone that suggested emotional injury. "Define drinkable," Adrian muttered back. The console chimed. Encryption keys unfolded like metallic petals across the display. High-level clearance, summit credentials, orbital coordinates. He stared at the header. Grand Convergence Summit. He leaned back slowly. "No," he told the room. "Absolutely not." The room, being a rented diplomatic apartment with minimal emotional investment, declined to respond. The message continued. Attendance mandatory. Seating assigned. Seating assigned was the detail that made his stomach tighten. At summits like this, seating was warfare disguised as furniture. He arrived 3 days later aboard a diplomatic courier that vibrated in protest every time it passed through a customs field. The summit citadel rotated above a blue star, its massive ring structure gleaming with calculated neutrality. No empire claimed ownership. Every empire claimed influence. Adrian adjusted his cuffs as he stepped into the reception corridor. Representatives drifted past in controlled clusters, scaled, luminous, armored, translucent. Translation fields hummed softly overhead. Security drones hovered like patient insects. He reminded himself to breathe at a socially acceptable rhythm. A protocol attendant approached, projecting a seating diagram into the air between them. The chamber appeared as a vast circle, tiers rising in precise symmetry. Names shimmered over each position. He located his own. He blinked. He checked again. He considered whether the diagram might be upside down. It was not. His assigned seat rested directly beside a name that required no embellishment. The most feared queen in the galaxy. He made a thoughtful sound that could have been interpreted as dignified contemplation if anyone had been charitable enough to grant him that interpretation. "Is this flexible?" he asked the attendant. "No," the attendant replied pleasantly. "Is it symbolic?" "Yes." "Is it survivable?" The attendant paused. "Statistically." He walked into the chamber with the steady composure of a man who had accepted that panic would only make the story worse later. The summit floor glowed faintly beneath each step. Holographic constellations rotated above, displaying contested systems like slow-moving arguments. Delegates were already seated. Murmurs rippled through the chamber like controlled weather. He found his place. He sat. There was an empty seat beside him. He had just enough time to consider pretending to faint when the atmosphere shifted. It did not grow louder. It did not grow darker. It simply tightened. She entered without announcement. Conversation thinned, not out of fear alone but out of instinct. Power alters air pressure. She moved with unhurried precision, her form almost human, poised, composed, impossibly controlled. Her skin held a faint iridescent sheen beneath the chamber lights. And her ears, long, elegant, rising in smooth arcs from either side of her head, tilted slightly as if sampling the emotional frequencies of the room. Adrian resisted the urge to touch his own ears in self-conscious comparison. She reached her seat, sat beside him, folded her hands, and said nothing. He had prepared greetings in 4 dialects. He had rehearsed neutral compliments about trade stability. He had even practiced a respectful nod angle in the mirror. None of them survived the silence. The chamber resumed its low hum of diplomatic maneuvering, but a secondary silence radiated outward from their shared space. He felt it settle on his shoulders. He considered speaking. He did not. He adjusted his posture once, deliberately slow, rested his hands loosely on the table, focused his gaze forward. Out of the corner of his vision he noticed the faintest movement. One ear flicked, not toward him, toward the chamber, listening. He became acutely aware of his own breathing. Too fast would signal nerves. Too slow would signal performance. He chose ordinary. Across the circle, a trade minister began a carefully worded address about resource corridors. The words floated harmlessly through the chamber. Beside him, the queen remained still. He wondered if she could hear his pulse. He hoped it sounded dignified. A representative 3 seats away attempted to glance subtly in their direction, and instead made direct eye contact with Adrian. The representative immediately looked down at their data slate as if discovering sudden fascination with agricultural tariffs. Adrian nearly smiled. He did not. Minutes stretched. He felt the pressure of unspoken expectation building like charge before a storm. Everyone anticipated an exchange, a threat, a calculated remark. She offered nothing. And slowly he began to understand. This was not absence. This was assessment. In her empire, silence was a blade. Those who rushed to fill it cut themselves. He let the quiet exist. He observed the chamber instead, the shifting alliances, the coded glances, the tension disguised as procedure. Another subtle movement. Her ear angled slightly in his direction, testing for fidgeting, for a nervous swallow, for the tremor of someone desperate to impress. He gave her none of it, not defiance, not submission, simply steadiness. A small disturbance erupted near the outer tier, 2 delegates arguing over navigational rights. Security drones drifted closer. Still, she did not intervene. Her presence alone stabilized the escalation. Adrian realized something unsettling and strangely reassuring. She did not need to speak to dominate the room. Power radiated from restraint. He adjusted his sleeve once more, careful, unhurried. If this was a test, it was not about wit or rhetoric. It was about endurance. The chamber lights shifted subtly as the next speaker took the floor. Beside him, the most feared queen in the galaxy remained silent. And Adrian Vale, who had once lost sleep over beverage synthesizers, decided that if the universe insisted on placing him at the epicenter of political gravity, the least he could do was sit still. He faced forward, he breathed, he waited, and the silence deepened. The silence did not break when the first session recessed. It followed them. Delegates rose in careful waves, conversation returning in controlled currents. Translation fields softened. Data projections dimmed. The summit floor shifted into informal configuration. Beside Adrian, the queen remained seated for exactly 3 breaths after everyone else stood. Then she rose. The movement was simple, unhurried, final. Half the chamber pretended not to watch. The other half failed spectacularly. Adrian stood as well, because remaining seated beside the most feared ruler in the galaxy felt like volunteering for a cautionary tale. She did not look at him. She did not dismiss him. She simply began walking toward the outer promenade where refreshments and strategic gossip waited in equal concentration. He followed at a respectful distance that he calculated using instinct, anxiety, and what he hoped resembled cultural awareness. The promenade overlooked the star below. Energy shields shimmered faintly. Delegations clustered in tight formations, speaking in low tones while pretending to admire stellar radiation. A server drone hovered toward them carrying crystalline glasses filled with something luminous and gently reactive. The drone paused between them. The queen selected one. Adrian selected one. His glass fizzed. He examined it carefully. It examined him back. He decided not to ask questions. They stood side by side at the viewing rail. Still she said nothing. He considered several opening lines. Lovely stellar decay cycle felt too casual. Impressive gravitational engineering felt like he was applying for a job. Hello again felt deeply inadequate. He remained quiet. A nearby ambassador leaned toward a colleague and whispered too loudly, "Is this a duel?" Adrian resisted the urge to turn around and clarify that if it was a duel, he had not been issued proper equipment. The queen lifted her glass, paused, took a measured sip. He mirrored the action half a second later, hoping the delay suggested deliberation rather than imitation. The drink changed flavor mid-swallow. He kept his expression neutral through sheer willpower. one of her long ears angled slightly backward, listening to the murmurs behind them, measuring reactions, testing pressure. He began to notice the pattern. Her silence created instability in others. The absence of performance forced everyone else to reveal themselves. Across the promenade, a trade magnate attempted a casual approach. He slowed as he neared them, recalibrating his confidence. "Your Majesty," the magnate began, voice smooth. "An honor." No response. The magnate's smile faltered. He pivoted slightly toward Adrian. "And humanity continues to expand its modest influence, I see." It was bait, mild, polished, designed to provoke insecurity. Adrian considered several replies. He settled on, "We try not to expand before breakfast. It makes the maps messy." The magnate blinked. A faint ripple of restrained amusement moved through nearby listeners. The Queen's ear flicked once, forward. The magnate retreated with what dignity he could salvage. Adrian exhaled slowly. He had not filled the silence. He had redirected it. Progress, he supposed. They remained at the rail. Minutes passed again, though now the quiet felt different, less like pressure, more like shared space. He became aware that she had positioned herself neither dominating nor retreating. Perfectly aligned. Equilibrium again. A flicker in the upper projection field caught his eye. Border skirmish indicators. Minor system. Escalation probability rising. He did not react outwardly. He sensed rather than saw her attention shift. Her ear angled toward the projection. Still she did not speak. A junior envoy nearby noticed the alert and panicked audibly. This could destabilize the entire corridor. Several heads turned. The Queen remained composed. Adrian considered whether silence was still required. He chose measured action instead. He activated his wrist console and accessed the public diplomatic channel. Without drawing attention, he submitted a stabilizing analysis, resource dependency matrices, projected supply chain consequences, mutual vulnerability models. Neutral tone, no dramatics. The envoy's console chimed. Others followed. The rising probability indicator plateaued. The room settled. The Queen turned her head slightly toward him for the first time since sitting beside him. Her gaze held steady, assessing. Her ear tilted forward, not aggressively, curiously. "You did not wait," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, resonant, controlled. It was the first time she had spoken within his hearing. Adrian chose his response carefully. "The data was deteriorating," he said. Silence felt inefficient. A pause, not cold, not warm, measured. "And yet," she said, "you did not seek recognition." "I prefer surviving the summit," he replied. "Recognition can be hazardous." A faint shift touched her expression. Not quite a smile, but not absence either. "Most speak to be seen," she said. "I prefer to remain difficult to target," he answered. One of her ears lifted slightly higher. There it was again. That almost approval. Around them, conversation resumed, unaware that something subtle had shifted. She returned her gaze to the star. "Many attempt to impress me," she said after a moment. "I considered it," Adrian admitted. "I rejected it as statistically unwise." A beat then. A sound, soft, brief, not laughter exactly, but dangerously close. Several nearby delegates stiffened in confusion. Had the Queen just? No, surely not. Her composure returned instantly. "Human," she said, still facing forward. "You are either very controlled or very foolish." "I've been both," he said. "Today I'm attempting controlled." Silence again, but lighter now, less blade, more balance. A signal chimed across the promenade. Delegates were being recalled for the second session. She turned toward the chamber entrance. He fell into step beside her, not behind, not ahead, aligned. As they re-entered the summit floor, he sensed the room recalibrating. Whispers adjusted tone, observers re-evaluated equations. The most feared queen in the galaxy resumed her seat. Adrian sat beside her once more. This time the silence did not feel like a void. It felt like shared territory. The session resumed. Speeches began. Accusations circled. She remained quiet. So did he. But now, the quiet was no longer a test he was merely surviving. It was a language he was beginning to understand. The second session opened with projections of contested space rotating above the chamber like polite threats. Adrian folded his hands on the table and reminded himself that breathing remained socially acceptable. Beside him, the queen sat in perfect stillness, her long ears angled slightly outward, listening not just to words but to hesitation, to the microscopic fractures in confidence that pulsed through the room. A mineral consortium representative began outlining territorial claims with theatrical restraint. Borders glowed red. Trade corridors flashed amber. Fleet signatures shimmered like distant storms. "No one desires escalation," the representative said, in the precise tone of someone who had prepared extensively for escalation. Murmurs rippled outward. The queen did not move. Adrian wondered if stillness burned calories. A military delegate from the outer spiral leaned forward. "Stability requires strength," he said. "Strength requires demonstration." Adrian resisted the urge to suggest a less explosive hobby. He sensed tension rising like atmospheric pressure before lightning. Several consoles flickered as observers monitored fleet mobilizations in real time. The summit was not merely discussion. It was performance synchronized with actual armadas waiting in orbit. Beside him, the queen's ear shifted a fraction toward the military delegate. Not approval, measurement. Adrian found himself counting seconds between statements, mapping conversational gaps the way navigators mapped asteroid belts. The military delegate finished. The chamber waited. Everyone expected the queen to respond. She did not. The silence thickened again, deliberate and immense. Across the chamber, a minor envoy cleared his throat prematurely and immediately regretted existing. Adrian almost admired the queen's precision. She wielded absence like architecture. A new projection flashed abruptly, an automated alert from a border system previously considered stable. A defense grid had activated without authorization. Fleet signatures flared to life. Several delegates began speaking at once. "It's a malfunction." "No, it's provocation." "Stand down." Security drones shifted closer to the central dais. Adrian's pulse accelerated, but his posture remained neutral. He glanced toward the queen. She had not changed expression. Her ear angled slightly toward the projection, then toward the speakers, then, very subtly, toward him. It was not a command, it was opportunity. He activated his console and accessed the shared strategic channel. Data streamed across his display. Energy surges, defense protocols, communication lags. He recognized the pattern. "Automated deterrence response," he said calmly into the channel. Several delegates paused mid-argument. He continued, tone steady. "If both sides stagger calibration by 3.7 seconds, the system will reclassify as routine maneuvering." A beat silence. Then one fleet signature flickered. Then another. The red glow dimmed to amber. The alert dissolved. The chamber exhaled collectively. The military delegate narrowed his eyes. "You speak with confidence for a mid-tier envoy." Adrian considered replying with a comment about surviving beverage synthesizers but decided against it. "Confidence is just pattern recognition with good posture," he said instead. A few restrained sounds that might have been laughter escaped from somewhere behind him. The queen turned her head slightly. "You intervened without prompting," she said quietly. "The system didn't seem interested in ceremony," he replied. A pause. "You assume authority easily," she observed. "I prefer assuming responsibility," he said. "Authority attracts paperwork." One of her ears lifted almost imperceptibly. Across the chamber, alliances recalibrated. What had nearly escalated into confrontation now looked like an embarrassing technical misunderstanding, which, Adrian knew, was far preferable to war. A rival chancellor leaned back and spoke with deliberate smoothness. "Human analysis is convenient. Translation suspicious." Adrian nodded politely. "Convenience is underrated." The chamber shifted into debate again, but something fundamental had altered. The Queen had not spoken. She had not commanded fleets or issued decrees, and yet stability had emerged beside her. Observers noticed. Whispers recalculated. The session moved into resource negotiations. Holographic trade routes wove intricate patterns overhead. Energy taxation models shimmered in layered projections. Adrian listened. He noticed who rushed to fill pauses, who avoided eye contact, who exaggerated certainty. Beside him, the Queen remained composed, allowing others to reveal themselves through impatience. At one point, a trade baron attempted subtle provocation. "Some cultures," the baron said lightly, "interpret silence as uncertainty." The chamber stilled. Adrian kept his gaze forward. The Queen did not react. The baron continued, emboldened. Power must sometimes declare itself. Adrian considered the delicate mathematics of humor under threat. He spoke without turning his head. Stars don't announce their mass. They let gravity handle introductions. A ripple moved across the chamber. The baron stiffened. The Queen's ear tilted toward Adrian, forward, measured. A long moment passed. Then softly she spoke, not to the baron, not to the chamber, but just loud enough to carry. "Indeed." One word. It landed with more weight than any speech delivered that day. The baron withdrew into dignified silence. Negotiations resumed. Hours passed in layered argument and careful compromise. Adrian found himself less focused on survival and more engaged in rhythm. He anticipated conversational tides, redirected minor hostilities before they sharpened, allowed silence to work where noise would fail. He realized gradually that he was no longer merely enduring proximity to power. He was participating in equilibrium. As the session neared conclusion, the presiding arbiter announced provisional agreements across 3 contested sectors. Not perfect, not permanent, but stable. Delegates stood. The summit floor dimmed to recess lighting. The Queen remained seated for a moment longer. Then she turned fully toward Adrian, her long ears angled toward him in symmetrical alignment. "You are not destabilized by proximity," she said. "I've shared public transport with senators," he replied. "This feels familiar." A faint shift touched her expression again, that near laughter, restrained but unmistakable. "You understand silence," she said. "I'm learning its dialect," he answered. She rose. He rose with her. As they walked toward the promenade once more, he sensed the chamber watching, not with suspicion now, but curiosity. The most feared queen in the galaxy had spoken little, but she had chosen when to speak. And beside her, the human who had not rushed to fill emptiness had begun to change the gravitational balance of the room. The summit was not over, but the test had evolved. And for the first time, Adrian felt not like a man surviving political orbit, but like someone capable of standing at its center without flinching. By the 4th session, the summit had stopped pretending to be polite. Fleet projections rotated faster. Economic forecasts sharpened into ultimatums. Delegates spoke with the careful calm of beings calculating consequences in real time. Adrian sat beside the Queen and noticed something new. The silence no longer pressed on him. It moved with him. A notification pulsed across every console in the chamber. Unidentified signal source detected within summit perimeter. Security drones reoriented midair. Several representatives stiffened. A few reached discreetly toward concealed devices that were definitely not decorative. The presiding arbiter's voice attempted composure. "Remain calm. Containment protocols are." The chamber lights flickered. The star outside flared in the projection field, then fragmented into static for half a second too long. Adrian did not move. Beside him, the Queen remained still, but one ear angled sharply upward, listening beyond the chamber, beyond the station. He accessed his console without haste. The signal source was not external. It was inside the orbital structure, layered beneath official transmission bands, hidden in background radiation. "That's deliberate," he murmured. The Queen's gaze shifted fractionally toward him. "You detect pattern," she said quietly. "It's piggybacking on the translation grid," he replied, "amplifying emotional variance, increasing misinterpretation probability." Across the chamber, voices began overlapping in subtle distortion. Words arrived a fraction too sharp. Tones carried unintended aggression. Someone wanted escalation, not through fleets, through misunderstanding. A chancellor slammed a hand onto the table. "We will not tolerate." The statement cut off mid-sentence, as translation algorithms recalibrated. The Queen did not raise her voice. She did not command silence. She simply lifted her hand slightly, not dramatically, just enough. The chamber quieted instinctively. Adrian tracked the signal cascade. It was adaptive, feeding on rising emotional spikes. He leaned closer to his console. "It's using feedback loops. The more tension increases, the stronger it gets." "Can you isolate?" she asked. "Yes," he said. Then, after a beat, "Probably." Her ear flicked once. Encouragement or warning, possibly both. He rerouted his console through a neutral bandwidth, bypassing the shared translation layer. Data streams reorganized into visible patterns. There, a sub-channel embedded within ceremonial broadcast frequencies. Whoever designed it understood Summit psychology very well. He opened a narrow diagnostic pulse. The signal recoiled slightly. He smiled faintly. "It doesn't like being observed." "Few destabilizing forces do," she replied. A rival delegate across the chamber stood abruptly. "This is manipulation. Someone is interfering." Adrian amplified his voice through the neutral channel, calm and even. "Yes, someone is. That is accurate. However, yelling increases its effectiveness." The delegate blinked. A few scattered chuckles moved through the room. Tension dipped microscopically. The signal weakened. The Queen's long ears angled toward Adrian again. "Proceed," she said. He initiated a slow counterharmonic, calibrated to dampen emotional spikes rather than suppress speech. It was less dramatic than shutting down the grid, but far more precise. Voices stabilized. Translation smoothed. The underlying hostility that had begun to swell evaporated into mild embarrassment. A silence fell, different from before, not sharp, not testing, aware. Security drones located the physical source. A concealed relay embedded within a decorative projection column. It detached under containment beams, its surface fracturing to reveal adaptive circuitry. The presiding arbiter exhaled audibly. "Sabotage." "Yes," the Queen said calmly, "but not of fleets, of perception." Her gaze moved slowly across the chamber. "Who benefits from amplified misunderstanding?" she asked. No one answered, because everyone knew the answer was, nearly everyone. Adrian leaned back slightly. "So," he said conversationally, "on the positive side, we have confirmed that shouting remains inefficient diplomacy." A ripple of restrained laughter moved through the delegates. The tension dropped another degree. The saboteur relay was removed under guard. The summit resumed, but the atmosphere had changed again. The attempt to fracture the room through engineered misinterpretation had failed, not through force, but through composure and precise response. The Queen turned slightly toward Adrian. "You recognized emotional manipulation," she said. "I've attended budget hearings," he replied. It felt familiar. Her gaze held his. "You did not react with outrage." "I assumed that was the objective," he said. "It seemed rude to cooperate." For a long moment she studied him, not as ruler to subject, not as predator to prey, but as strategist to strategist. "In my empire," she said quietly, "rebellions begin with raised voices." "In mine," he answered, "they begin with misread emails." Her ear twitched, forward, this time unmistakably amused. Across the chamber, delegates whispered recalibrated theories. The most feared queen had not crushed dissent. She had not issued decrees. She had not silenced rivals. She had allowed a human to neutralize chaos without spectacle. Power redistributed itself subtly in that realization. The arbiter signaled for final deliberations of the day. Trade agreements resumed. Border stabilizations formalized. The earlier near-escalation now seemed distant. Adrian felt something settle within him. The silence was no longer something he endured. It was something he could stand inside without shrinking. As the session concluded, the Queen rose. He rose with her. Before they stepped away from the central table, she spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. "You did not seek to expose the saboteur publicly. Public humiliation encourages sequel attempts," he said. "Quiet failure discourages repetition." A pause. "Your restraint is strategic," she observed. "I'm lazy," he replied. "War is expensive." Another flick of her ear, this one unmistakably forward, approval. They moved toward the promenade once more as the chamber dissolved into clusters of recalculation. Behind them, the summit did not buzz with fear. It hummed with something steadier. Equilibrium maintained not by dominance, but by composure under engineered provocation. And Adrian realized with mild surprise that he no longer felt like the man accidentally seated beside power. He felt like someone who understood how not to be moved by it. The final session awaited. The true conclusion had not yet arrived, but the galaxy had just witnessed something dangerous. Not the Queen's wrath, not her decree, her choice. And beside her, the human who had refused to let noise dictate action. The final session began without ceremony. No dramatic projections, no raised voices, no subtle attempts at psychological sabotage. Just a chamber full of beings who now understood that escalation had already failed. Adrian took his seat beside the Queen and felt something unfamiliar, calm that did not require effort. The presiding arbiter initiated the concluding agenda: permanent border accords, shared resource frameworks, and the formal identification of the summit saboteur. A security feed illuminated the chamber's central display. The relay device had been traced to a coalition of minor powers who believed conflict between major empires would create profitable instability. They had expected fleets. They had prepared for retaliation. They had not prepared for silence. A representative of the coalition stood, pale and rigid. "You cannot prove intent," the representative said. The Queen regarded them without visible reaction. Adrian activated a projection of signal architecture. Layered beneath it were timestamps, emotional variance metrics, predicted escalation curves. "You engineered misunderstanding," he said evenly. "You designed it to magnify irritation into hostility. It was mathematically elegant." The representative blinked. "That is not an accusation," Adrian added. "It's a compliment." A few startled laughs broke the tension. The representative faltered. "Conflict drives innovation." "Conflict drives funerals," Adrian replied gently. "Innovation prefers stability." The Queen finally spoke. "You sought to provoke war without firing a weapon," she said. "Why?" The representative hesitated. "Because you are feared," they admitted. "Fear creates imbalance. Imbalance creates opportunity." The chamber stilled. The Queen's long ears remained upright. "For cycles," she said calmly, "I allowed fear to serve as deterrent." She turned her gaze slowly across the assembly. But deterrence built on fear invites manipulation. Adrian felt the weight of that admission. It was not weakness. It was evolution. The representative lowered their head. "We miscalculated." "Yes," Adrian said. "You assumed we would react loudly." The Queen's gaze shifted toward him. He continued. "You built a device to amplify emotional spikes. You expected pride, outrage, retaliation. Instead, you encountered moderation. I apologize for the inconvenience." This time the laughter was open. Even the presiding arbiter's composure cracked. The representative's shoulders sagged. The Queen spoke again. "There will be sanctions," she said. "Economic restriction, diplomatic probation." A pause, but not annihilation. Shock rippled through the chamber. The military delegate who had once argued for strength leaned forward. "Mercy signals vulnerability." The Queen turned toward him. "No," she said. "Predictability signals vulnerability." Silence, then understanding. She rose from her seat and stepped forward, not in dominance but in clarity. "For too long," she continued, "I permitted myth to amplify my rule. Myth simplifies. Myth terrifies. Myth is easy." Her gaze swept the chamber. "But governance requires complexity. Stability requires dialogue. Power that depends on fear invites constant testing." Adrian listened, aware that the summit had shifted from negotiation to transformation. She looked at him briefly, then back to the chamber. This human envoy intervened repeatedly without aggression. He neutralized escalation without humiliation. He did not exploit weakness. He did not demand recognition. She paused. "He demonstrated a form of strength my empire has neglected." Adrian resisted the urge to look behind him to confirm she meant someone else. The military delegate folded his arms. "Restraint cannot command fleets." Adrian cleared his throat gently. "It can prevent needing them." A murmur of agreement moved outward. The Queen inclined her head slightly. "Effective immediately," she said. "My empire will revise its deterrence doctrine. Transparency will replace intimidation where possible. Strategic silence will replace spectacle." The words carried seismic implications. Trade barons recalculated profits. Chancellors recalibrated alliances. The coalition representatives sank into their seat, realizing their gamble had collapsed not under force, but under reform. The presiding arbiter formalized the accords. Borders stabilized. Shared patrol protocols established. Emotional variance dampeners integrated into the translation grid permanently. The summit, once poised on the brink of conflict, concluded with structural safeguards rather than scars. As delegates began to depart, the military delegate approached Adrian. "You are either very brave," he said, "or very foolish." Adrian considered. "I've been both," he admitted. "Bravery gets better press." The delegate almost smiled. When the chamber finally emptied, only Adrian and the Queen remained near the central dais. The star beyond the station burned steadily. No distortion, no static. "You altered the trajectory of this summit," she said. "I nudged," he replied. "You chose." She regarded him thoughtfully. "Fear was efficient," she said, "but it isolated me." "You're still terrifying," he assured her, "just selectively." Her ear flicked forward in unmistakable amusement. "You no longer tremble," she observed. He realized she was right. At the first session, he had measured every breath, every heartbeat. He had mistaken proximity to power for danger. Now he understood power could evolve, and so could he. "I learned something," he said quietly. "What?" she asked. "That silence isn't emptiness," he answered. "It's space. You can fill it with threat, or you can let others reveal themselves inside it." A pause. "And which will you choose?" she asked. He met her gaze without flinching. "Depends on the company." For the first time since their arrival, she allowed a visible smile. Small, genuine. "Will you remain as liaison?" she asked. The question carried no coercion, only possibility. He thought of his former assignments, of surviving bureaucracy, of navigating rooms where noise masqueraded as authority. He felt different now. Not because he stood beside a feared ruler, but because he had discovered he did not need to shrink in powerful spaces. "Yes," he said, "on one condition." She tilted her head slightly. "No more weaponized beverage machines." A beat. Then she laughed, not restrained, not subtle, clear. The sound carried across the empty chamber and echoed against polished surfaces that had once held the weight of impending war. "Agreed," she said. They walked toward the exit together. Behind them, the summit chamber dimmed into archival mode. Fleets remained in orbit, but their weapons powered down. Trade corridors reopened. The sabotage coalition accepted sanctions without resistance. And across the galaxy,